Picture yourself stepping into your backyard just as the day begins. The grass is still damp with dew. The air smells faintly of fresh earth, and the sun is casting a soft golden light over everything it touches. You take a slow sip of coffee and look around, not for flaws, but for possibilities. Over the years, I've learned that you don't need deep pockets to have a beautiful garden. What you really need is a gentle patience, a dash of creativity, and the courage to see potential in what others might pass by. I remember my neighbor, Miss Linda, who once told me she had just $40 to spend on her garden one summer. Instead of heading to the big garden center for something new, she wandered through her garage, asked friends for odds and ends they didn't need, and stopped by a few thrift stores. By mid-July, her yard had become a storybook escape, chairs overflowing with blooms lanterns made from old jars and vines climbing up a ladder that had once sat forgotten behind her shed. That's the beauty of budget-friendly gardening. It's less about how much you spend and more about the heart you put into each choice. Every pot, every plant, every reused piece tells a little story. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you 20 simple low-cost hacks that can turn any backyard, big or small, into a place of peace, charm, and joy. Whether you've got aching knees, a tight budget, or simply love the thrill of making something from nothing, you'll find ideas here that fit your life. Some of the loveliest garden ideas begin not in a store, but in a corner of your garage, or even at the curb on trash day. Old chairs, the ones with worn paint or a wobbly leg, often get tossed aside. But in a garden, they can become something entirely new, a throne for your flowers. I first learned this from a dear friend named Carol. She'd been a teacher for 30 years, and when she retired, she found herself drawn to gardening. But bending low to plant or weed had become difficult for her knees. One spring, while cleaning out her attic, she came across a mismatched wooden chair from her first apartment. Instead of sending it to the donation pile, she brought it out to the yard, painted it a soft sage green, and set a pot of lavender on the seat. It was simple, charming, and most importantly, easy for her to care for. You can do the same, and the beauty is that it works with almost any type of chair, wooden, metal, even an old wicker seat if it's still sturdy enough to hold a pot. Start by checking the frame. If it's wobbly, a bit of wood glue or a few screws can make it stable again. Sanding isn't always necessary. Sometimes the chipped, weathered paint adds character. If you prefer a fresh look, a coat of outdoor spray paint will protect the chair and brighten your garden. Then simply place a pot on the seat, terracotta for a rustic look, ceramic for elegance, or a thrifted metal bucket for a farmhouse feel. The real beauty of using chairs as plant stands is accessibility. Instead of kneeling or bending, your plants are lifted to a comfortable height. This makes watering, pruning, and admiring them so much easier, especially if your mobility is limited. For heavier pots, consider cutting a hole in the seat and resting the pot inside for stability. And don't just think about flowers. Herbs, small vegetables like cherry tomatoes, or even cascading plants like ivy or petunias all thrive in raised containers. If you have more than one chair, you can create a grouping for a layered effect. Imagine 3 different heights. A tall, stately chair holding a bright geranium, a lower one with trailing lobelia, and a small child's chair cradling a pot of cheerful marigolds. These little clusters can frame a walkway, brighten a patio corner, or even serve as a playful welcome near your front door. Carol's single chair eventually turned into 5, each one painted a different pastel. She liked to say her chairs were like her former students, each unique, each with its own personality, and each thriving when given a little care. When you walk through her garden now, the chairs seem to smile, holding their blossoms proudly toward the sun. And that's the lesson, really. Beauty isn't about perfection. It's about finding new life in something old, giving it a purpose again, and letting it bring joy for many more seasons to come. There's something magical about a garden at twilight. The air cools, the world softens, and the light takes on a gentle golden hue. It's the kind of moment when you wish you could just sit quietly and watch the day fold itself into evening. That's when soft, warm lighting can make your backyard feel like a storybook scene, and you don't need expensive fixtures to make it happen. Mason jars, those humble glass containers you might already have in your kitchen, can be transformed into enchanting solar lanterns for just a few dollars. I remember my cousin Marjorie doing this years ago when she moved into a little cottage on the edge of town. She had more charm than cash, so she turned to her local thrift store, buying a box of mismatched mason jars for under $5. The next stop was the hardware store, where she picked up solar light lids, small round tops that fit right over the jar opening. That very weekend, she placed her finished lanterns along the path to her back porch, and when the sun went down, her yard seemed to glow from within. Making your own is just as simple. Start with clean jars. Quart size works well, but smaller jars add variety. If you want to dress them up, you can wrap the jar necks with jute twine or ribbon, or even frost the glass using inexpensive spray. Then fit the solar lid snugly on top. Most lids have a small panel that charges in the sun during the day and automatically lights up at night. The beauty of this is that you don't have to worry about wiring batteries or switches. Nature does all the work. You can place these lanterns on tables, line them along garden edges, or hang them from sturdy hooks or tree branches. For a romantic touch, try hanging them in clusters at varying heights. It's like having floating fireflies that never drift away. If mobility is a concern, you can arrange them all at waist height so you never have to bend or reach high to move them. Marjorie's garden became known for these lanterns. Neighbors would stop by just to walk her path at night, admiring the soft pools of light. She often said it wasn't just about making her garden look pretty, it was about making it feel welcoming. A place where friends could linger a little longer, where an ordinary Tuesday evening could feel like a celebration. And that's the quiet gift of Mason Jar's solar lanterns. They don't just light up your garden, they light up the moments you spend there. They remind us that with a little imagination, we can turn even the simplest things into something that glows. Sometimes the most striking garden features are born from objects that have outlived their original use. An old wooden ladder paint-splattered rungs worn smooth from years of climbing might seem destined for the landfill. But in the garden, it can become a graceful tiered display, lifting flowers, herbs, and greenery into the sunlight without taking up much space. This idea is especially perfect if your backyard is small, or if bending down for planting has become difficult. I first saw a ladder garden in my Aunt Grace's backyard. She lived in a small townhouse with barely enough soil for a rose bush, but she loved growing things. One day she found an old ladder at a yard sale for just $5. Instead of propping it in the garage, she leaned it gently against her fence and began filling each rung with a different plant. The bottom rung held sturdy pots of basil and rosemary for easy picking. The middle levels overflowed with colorful blooms, zinnias, geraniums, and petunias. At the very top, a trailing ivy cascaded down like a green waterfall. Creating your own ladder garden is simple. If the ladder is wooden, check for stability, secure any loose rungs, and sand rough edges. A fresh coat of weather-resistant paint or sealant can protect it from the elements. Then, decide on placement. Leaning it against a wall or fence keeps it steady, but you can also set it up freestanding if you anchor it well. Each rung can hold small planters, wooden crates, or even hanging baskets hooked over the side. Think about plant variety when arranging your display. Herbs and lettuces are ideal for the lower rungs where you can reach them easily. Mid-level rungs can hold bright annuals to draw the eye, while the top rung is perfect for trailing plants like lobelia, sweet potato vine, or creeping jenny. If lifting pots is difficult, start with the ladder lying flat on the ground, arrange your plants, and then gently tilt it upright. A ladder garden is not just functional, it's a conversation piece. Guests can't help but ask about it, and it often becomes the spot where everyone stops to admire. Aunt Grace used to joke that her ladder did more climbing in the garden than it ever did in the house. She would change the plants with the season's pansies and spring petunias, in summer small mums in fall, so it never looked tired or forgotten. In many ways, a ladder garden reminds us that even when something can't serve its original purpose, it can still hold beauty, purpose, and life. With a little vision, you're not just saving an old object, you're giving it a new place in your story. And in return, it gives your garden height, color, and a touch of the unexpected. There's a certain kind of joy that comes from seeing small birds flit into your garden, especially in the quiet of early morning. They perch, peck, and sometimes pause just long enough for you to feel like you've shared a moment together. You don't need a fancy bird feeder to invite them in. Just a few old teacups and saucers can create a charming, budget-friendly welcome for your feathered guests. I first spotted this idea at a church fair in the spring. A lady named Margaret, well into her 70s, had a booth filled with the most delightful teacup bird feeders. Each one was unique, some patterned with roses, others with delicate gold rims, all paired with matching or mismatched saucers. Margaret told me she'd started making them after inheriting her mother's tea set. Some cups were chipped, others too worn to use for tea, but they were far too lovely to toss away, so she gave them a new life outdoors. Making one is surprisingly simple. All you need is a sturdy teacup, a saucer, and a strong adhesive suitable for outdoor use. Tilt the teacup sideways on the saucer so the bird seed can spill gently out, then glue it in place and let it cure completely. Once dry, you can attach the saucer to a metal rod or hang it from a sturdy chain. For a more whimsical touch, some people glue the cup upright and fill it with seed, letting the saucer catch any overflow. The placement matters as much as the design. Position your teacup feeder where you can see it easily from a window or favorite garden chair, ideally near a tree or shrub where birds can rest and feel safe. If bending is difficult, mount it on a tall pole or place it on a table height stand so you can refill it without strain. Margaret's feeders became the talk of her neighborhood. In the mornings, she'd sit with her tea and watch sparrows, finches, and the occasional cardinal hop around her garden. She swore they seemed friendlier when they had such a pretty place to eat. And the truth is, she was feeding more than just the birds, she was feeding her own soul too. A teacup bird feeder is more than a clever upcycle. It's a reminder that small, thoughtful touches can turn an ordinary backyard into a place of gentle wonder. The birds don't care if the cup is chipped or mismatched, they care that it's there waiting for them. And as they come and go, you're reminded that beauty often lives in the little things we choose to share. One of the quiet frustrations of gardening is realizing that your tools, gloves and pots, never seem to be where you left them. You set down the trowel while watering, and the next day it's vanished under a pile of leaves. Over time, I learned that a tidy garden is as much about organizing as it is about planting. And one of the simplest, most affordable solutions I've found is repurposing wooden crates. These crates, whether they once held apples, bottles, or deliveries, are sturdy, lightweight, and full of rustic charm. You can often find them at flea markets, yard sales, or even discarded behind grocery stores with permission. I still remember when my friend Harold, a retired carpenter, gave me 3 old fruit crates he'd rescued from a farm auction. They were rough with faded lettering and splinters along the edges, but they were solid. We sanded them just enough to remove sharp bits, leaving the weathered look intact, and suddenly they became both functional and beautiful in the garden. You can use wooden crates in so many ways. Stack them against a wall to create a shelving unit for pots, gloves, and watering cans. Lay them on their sides to hold bags of soil or store long-handled tools. Mount a few to a fence or shed wall for vertical storage, perfect for small spaces where floor room is limited. And because they're portable, you can rearrange them with the seasons or move them closer to your workspace when needed. If bending is a challenge, try stacking crates into a waist-high station. Place a piece of plywood or an old countertop on top, and you have an instant potting bench without spending a dime on fancy furniture. A coat of outdoor sealant can extend their life, and a few hooks screwed into the sides can hold smaller tools or garden scissors. What I love most about crate storage is how it blends into the garden rather than feeling like an eyesore. The faded wood and old labels tell a story. They've carried fruit, survived weather, and now they serve again. Harold, who gave me mine, used to say that wood has a memory. Every time I pull a trowel from a crate, I think about the hands that built it, the fields it once served, and the fact that it still has work to do. In the end, organizing your garden isn't about making it look perfect for guests. It's about making it easier for you to enjoy your time there without the frustration of misplaced tools. Wooden crates help you do just that, adding a bit of history, charm, and order to your little corner of the world. When you've run out of ground space, but your love for plants hasn't slowed, it's time to start looking upward. Vertical gardening is a wonderful way to add more greenery without expanding your footprint. And one of the easiest, most affordable tools for this is something you might already have tucked away in a closet: a hanging fabric shoe organizer. I first saw this used in a garden while visiting my niece Emily in her downtown apartment. Her balcony was barely big enough for a small table and chair, but she wanted fresh herbs and flowers within arm's reach. Instead of cluttering the floor, she bought a $10 canvas shoe organizer from a discount store, the kind with rows of pockets for sneakers. With a little creativity, each pocket became a miniature planter. She lined the inside with plastic to prevent water from soaking through, filled them with potting soil, and tucked in basil, mint, parsley, and even a few strawberry plants. Setting one up is simple. Choose a sturdy organizer made from thick fabric or heavy-duty canvas, ideally with metal grommets for hanging. Secure it to a fence wall or balcony railing where it will get the right amount of sunlight. Line each pocket with a piece of landscape fabric plastic or even cut sections from an old grocery bag to help retain soil while still allowing drainage. Then fill with lightweight potting mix and plant seeds or small starts. The benefits go beyond saving space. Everything is at eye level, so there's no bending or kneeling to tend your plants. Watering is quick. You can move along each row with a small watering can. And if a plant struggles, you can simply replace it without disturbing the others. Emily's organizer became such a conversation piece that her neighbors started copying the idea. By midsummer, her balcony wall looked like a patchwork quilt of green and blossoms, each pocket offering a little burst of life. In winter, she swapped the plants for pine branches, holly, and battery-operated fairy lights, proving the setup could be decorative year-round. This simple repurposing trick carries a bigger reminder: beauty often comes from rethinking what you already have. A shoe organizer meant for tucking away old sneakers becomes a living tapestry of color and flavor. It's proof that gardening isn't about the size of your space, but the size of your imagination and a willingness to see potential hanging right in front of you. Sometimes the best planters are the ones that were never meant for plants at all. An old kitchen colander with its gentle curves and built-in drainage holes is just begging to be filled with soil and flowers. They're inexpensive, often found at thrift stores for a couple of dollars, and they add a touch of unexpected charm to a garden space. I first fell in love with the idea when visiting my friend Nora's porch one spring. From her eaves hung 3 brightly painted colanders, each overflowing with blooms. One cradled trailing petunias in soft pink and purple, another burst with bright yellow marigolds, and the third held a cascade of white alyssums spilling over the sides like lace. They swayed gently in the breeze, catching the sunlight through their holes and casting playful dots of light onto the porch floor. Creating your own colander hanging basket is as simple as it is satisfying. Start with any colander metal enamel or even sturdy plastic. If you find a metal one with rust, don't worry, a quick scrub and a coat of rust-resistant spray paint will give it new life. Attach 3 or 4 lengths of chain or heavy twine evenly around the rim, securing them with small S-hooks or drilling holes if needed. Gather the chains at the top and connect them to a larger hook for hanging. Before planting, line the inside with coconut coir moss or even a piece of burlap to keep soil from falling through. Add a lightweight potting mix and choose plants that will spill beautifully over the sides. Think Lobelia calabrachoa or creeping jenny. For herbs, thyme and oregano do especially well in these airy containers. One of the hidden advantages of colander baskets is airflow. The holes allow roots to breathe, reducing the risk of rot, and rainwater drains away easily. This makes them perfect for gardeners who tend to overwater or live in wetter climates. And because they're lightweight, you can hang them at any height that's comfortable for you, no bending or stretching required. Nora told me her favorite part of using colanders is the way they make people smile. Visitors always ask about them, and more than once she's sent a friend home with an extra she found at a yard sale. She calls it passing the garden joy forward. And that's exactly what these whimsical planters do. They take something ordinary and turn it into a conversation, a memory, and a piece of living art. In the right hands, even the simplest kitchen tool can hold a garden's worth of beauty. There's something deeply satisfying about growing your own herbs. Not only do they add fresh flavor to your meals, but they also bring a burst of green life to your home. And here's the best part: you don't need fancy pots or expensive planters to do it. A few cleaned and repurposed tin cans can become the heart of a charming, budget-friendly herb garden. I first tried this idea after a summer family barbecue. We'd gone through cans of tomatoes, beans, and corn for salads and sides, and I hated the thought of tossing all that good metal into the recycling bin. So I washed them thoroughly, peeled off the labels, and lined them up on my kitchen counter. Each one was just the right size for basil, parsley, chives, and cilantro. The look was simple but surprisingly stylish, like a little row of silver soldiers standing at attention ready to feed the family. Making a tin can herb garden couldn't be easier. Start with clean cans. Standard 15-ounce ones work well, but you can mix in larger soup or coffee cans for variety. Use a hammer and nail to poke several drainage holes in the bottom. If you're worried about sharp edges, gently sand them down or cover the rim with washi tape or ribbon for a soft touch. Then fill each can with a lightweight potting mix and plant your herb seeds or starts. You can keep them indoors on a sunny windowsill or arrange them outdoors on a table shelf or even hung from a wooden pallet for a vertical display. For extra charm, paint the cans in cheerful colors or use chalkboard paint so you can write the herb names right on the surface. This is especially handy if you like to swap plants out with the seasons. The beauty of this setup is accessibility. Herbs are usually small, so you can group them close together, making watering and harvesting quick and easy. If you have trouble bending, just place the cans on a raised surface at a height that's comfortable for you. And because the containers are light, they can be moved to chase the sun or brought indoors during cold snaps. One summer, I gave a set of painted herb cans to my neighbor Ruth, who'd recently taken up cooking as a hobby. She kept them right on her balcony and would pluck fresh basil for pasta or mint for her afternoon tea. "It's like having my own little grocery store," she told me one afternoon, smiling over the rim of her teacup. And that's exactly the gift of a tin can herb garden. It turns the everyday act of cooking into something rooted in your own care and creativity. A can that once held soup or beans now gives back to you season after season in flavor, beauty, and the quiet joy of tending something alive. Most gardeners feel a pang of frustration when they accidentally crack a clay pot. After all, it's easy to think its usefulness has ended. But in truth, a broken pot can become the centerpiece of one of the most enchanting DIY projects, a miniature fairy garden. Instead of heading for the trash, that cracked pot can tell a whole new story. I first learned this from my friend Louise, who has a knack for seeing possibilities where others see problems. One spring afternoon, she knocked over her largest terracotta pot while rearranging her patio. The side split into two jagged pieces, and the rim chipped in several spots. Rather than sigh and toss it away, she carefully layered soil inside, tucking the broken shards back into the pot to create little terraces. On each tier, she planted tiny succulents, creeping thyme and moss. Then came the magic small pebbles for paths, a thimble-sized bird bath, and a miniature wooden door propped against the side, as if to invite fairies in for tea. Making your own is as much about imagination as it is about materials. Start with a damaged pot, ideally one with large enough breaks to form steps or ledges. If the breaks aren't quite right, you can carefully chip the edges with a hammer to shape them. Just wear gloves and eye protection. Arrange the pieces inside the pot so they create little levels, securing them with soil. Then choose miniature plants that won't outgrow the space. Succulents, dwarf ferns, baby's tears, or small flowering ground covers work beautifully. Decorations are where your personality shines. You can buy miniature accessories from craft stores, but many are easy to make. Tiny benches from popsicle sticks, fairy houses from bark and twigs, or little signs from stones and paint all add to the charm. If bending or kneeling is difficult, place your fairy garden on a table or raised platform so you can work and admire it comfortably. Louise's garden became a conversation starter every time someone visited. Children were drawn to it instantly, leaning in to examine each tiny detail, while adults marveled at how something broken could become so beautiful. She liked to say it was her reminder that nothing is ever truly ruined. It just might have a different purpose than before. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. A broken pot, like a season of life that didn't go as planned, can still bloom with wonder when handled with care. In the right hands, cracks aren't flaws. They're the framework for something entirely new. For many gardeners, the joy of tending plants can be dampened by the strain of carrying heavy watering cans or bending repeatedly to reach the roots. That's where a simple, inexpensive tool can make all the difference: PVC pipe transformed into a gentle watering wand. This easy DIY not only saves time, but also makes watering more comfortable for anyone with limited mobility. I first saw this in use at a community garden where older members tended long rows of vegetables. One gentleman named Walt had arthritis in his hands and found lifting a full watering can painful. Instead, he carried a lightweight PVC pipe about 5 feet long, capped at one end with a garden hose fitting. Near the bottom, he drilled a row of small holes, each angled slightly downward. When connected to the hose, the water flowed out in a soft, even spray, right at plant level. No stooping, no heavy lifting. Making your own is straightforward. Choose a PVC pipe about 1/2 to 3/4 inch in diameter. Drill holes along the bottom portion, spacing them 2 to 3 inches apart. Attach a hose connector to the top end. These can be found cheaply at hardware stores. If you'd like extra control over the flow, add a small shutoff valve between the connector and the pipe. You can even wrap the handle area with foam or cloth for a softer grip. To use, simply connect the wand to your hose, hold it at a comfortable angle, and walk along your garden beds. The water will reach the roots without splashing the leaves, helping prevent fungal diseases. This setup is especially handy for raised beds or container gardens where precise watering is key. Walt told me that the first season he used his watering wand, his tomatoes grew taller and produced more fruit because he was able to water more consistently. "It's not just easier on me," he said with a grin. "It's easier on the plants too." And that's the beauty of this hack. It marries practicality with care. It's a reminder that in gardening, the right tools don't have to be expensive or complicated. Sometimes they're just a few thoughtful steps away, made with our own hands, designed for our own comfort. With a PVC pipe and a little creativity, you can keep your garden thriving without straining your body, proving once again that gardening should be a joy, not a chore. Every gardener knows there's something precious about a little privacy. Whether you're sipping tea on your porch, reading under a shady tree, or simply weeding in peace, it's comforting to feel that your garden is your own hidden retreat. The trouble is, traditional privacy fencing can be expensive. That's where reclaimed wooden pallets step in strong, budget-friendly, and full of rustic charm. I first discovered this idea while visiting my friend Sam's backyard. His home sat close to the neighbors, and while they got along well, he wanted a cozier, more secluded feel for his patio. Rather than pay for new fencing, Sam collected free pallets from a local hardware store. Most businesses are happy to give them away, if you ask. With a weekend's work, he stood them upright side by side, securing them to sturdy posts. The effect was instant, a rustic wall that felt warm and inviting instead of cold or stark. Building your own pallet privacy screen is straightforward. Choose pallets in good condition, free from rot or large cracks. Sand rough spots to prevent splinters, but leave some of the weathered texture for character. You can stain or paint them to match your garden style, or leave them bare for a natural look. Secure them vertically to metal or wooden posts driven into the ground, or hinge 2 or 3 together to make a freestanding folding screen that you can move as needed. The beauty of pallet screens is that they can do more than block views. They can hold life. Sam attached small planter boxes to his, filling them with colorful flowers and cascading ivy. In summer, he added herbs right into the boxes so he could pluck basil and mint without walking to the garden beds. The vertical surface became part privacy, part living art. For those who find lifting heavy items difficult, consider building the screen in sections on the ground, then enlisting help to set them upright. Once in place, you can maintain the plants or decorations at comfortable heights. Over time, Sam's pallet wall weathered to a soft gray, blending beautifully with his garden. He liked to say it wasn't just a screen, it was a stage for the plants to perform. And in many ways, that's the heart of this idea. You're not only creating privacy, you're building a backdrop that frames the beauty of your garden. With a few pallets and a free afternoon, you can turn an exposed space into a cozy haven that feels entirely your own. A garden has a way of teaching us patience, but it can also test our memory. You plant seeds in neat rows, imagining their future blooms or harvests, only to forget which patch holds basil and which holds oregano weeks later. Store-bought plant markers solve the problem, but they're often flimsy or expensive. Painted rocks, however, offer a charming, durable, and budget-friendly alternative, and they bring a splash of art into the garden. I first tried this after a rainy spring day when I couldn't get outside to dig. I sat at my kitchen table with a few smooth river rocks I'd collected years earlier, and a small box of acrylic paints. One by one, I painted each rock with the name of a plant: tomatoes in bold red letters, lavender with a sprig, painted alongside rosemary framed with green swirls. By the time the rain cleared, I had a little pile of cheerful markers ready to nestle into the soil. Making them is simple. Start with smooth, flat stones. River rocks work best. Wash and dry them thoroughly. Use outdoor acrylic paint or paint pens to write the plant name, and if you feel inspired, add a small illustration. Once dry, seal each rock with a clear outdoor sealant to protect it from rain and sunlight. The result is a set of markers that will last season after season. The beauty of painted rocks is that they're easy to personalize. If bending down is uncomfortable, you can make larger markers that are easy to spot from a standing position. You can also create color codes: yellow rocks for herbs, blue for flowers, green for vegetables, to make identification quick. And because they're weighted, they won't blow away or tip over like lightweight plastic stakes. One summer, my neighbor Joyce invited her grandchildren over to help her make a set. Each child painted their own marker for the plant they adopted in her garden. As the season went on, they would visit to check their plant's progress, proudly standing by the marker they had made. It turned into a little tradition. Every spring, new rocks were painted, and every autumn they were collected and stored for the next year. Painted rock markers aren't just functional. They're a piece of the gardener's personality scattered among the beds. They tell stories, mark time, and add color even before the flowers bloom. And perhaps best of all, they remind us that a garden is not only a place for growing plants, it's a place for growing memories. Climbing plants have a way of adding romance and movement to a garden. Morning glories unfurl in the dawn light. Sweet peas release their delicate scent, and beans wind their way upward as if reaching for the sky. All they need is a bit of structure, and one of the most charming, low-cost ways to provide it is by turning a thrifted picture frame into a trellis. I stumbled upon this idea while browsing a flea market one sunny afternoon. There, leaning against a stack of old mirrors, was an oversized wooden picture frame. The glass was gone, the backing warped, but the carved edges had such character that I couldn't resist. For $3, it came home with me. With a bit of wire and creativity, it soon became the centerpiece of my climbing plant display. Creating your own is easier than you might think. Start with a sturdy frame. Wooden or metal both work, but make sure it's solid enough to stand upright or hang securely. Remove any remaining glass or backing. Then stretch garden twine, chicken wire, or even decorative metal grating across the empty space, securing it with a staple gun or small nails. If you prefer a softer look, crisscross twine into diamond or square patterns to guide your plants as they climb. Placement is key. Lean the frame against a wall, anchor it between two posts, or hang it on a fence where it will catch the sunlight. It works beautifully for smaller climbers like nasturtiums, peas, or miniature gourds. For those who find kneeling difficult, the vertical structure allows for planting at the base without needing to stoop. Repeatedly, everything grows upward where it's easy to admire and tend. One summer, I used a pair of matching frames on either side of my garden gate, training fragrant jasmine to weave through them. By midsummer, the frames were nearly hidden by blooms, and guests would pause to inhale the sweet scent before stepping through. A friend later told me it felt like walking into a storybook. The beauty of a thrifted frame trellis is in its blend of art and function. You're giving new life to something once meant to hold pictures, now holding living portraits that change with the seasons. And much like the plants, it supports the frame itself has a history. Perhaps it once hung in someone's hallway or displayed a wedding photo. Now it becomes part of your garden story, offering strength, charm, and a reminder that beauty often comes from simply reimagining what's already there. There's a certain nostalgia in an old wooden drawer, the smooth glide marks from years of use, the knobs worn soft from countless hands opening and closing it. When a dresser becomes too broken to save, those drawers don't have to end up at the curb. With a little creativity, they can become unique, eye-catching planters that add personality to any garden space. I first saw this idea in my friend Clara's backyard. She had a row of 3 drawers, each painted in a different pastel color: mint green, butter yellow, and sky blue, sitting atop a wooden bench. Each one was filled with lush blooms. The green drawer held pansies in shades of violet and gold. The yellow overflowed with trailing lobelia, and the blue was home to bright pink geraniums. It was like a little parade of color, And Clara told me the drawers had come from the dresser she used as a child. I couldn't bear to throw them out, she said, so I decided to give them a second life. Making your own drawer planter is simple. Start by cleaning the drawer thoroughly and, if needed, reinforcing the corners with nails or wood glue. Drill several small holes in the bottom for drainage. This step is important to keep plants healthy. You can leave the wood bare for a rustic look, paint it to match your garden's color scheme, or even decoupage the sides with floral patterns for extra charm. Once prepared, fill the drawer with a lightweight potting mix. For flowers, choose a mix of upright and trailing varieties for visual interest. Petunias, marigolds, or begonias pair beautifully with cascading ivy or creeping jenny. If bending is difficult, place the drawer on a table shelf or even another piece of old furniture so it's easy to reach. You can also stack drawers in a staggered formation for a tiered planter effect. One thing I love about drawer planters is their versatility. You can plant herbs for a functional kitchen garden, succulents for low-maintenance beauty, or even seasonal displays, pansies in spring, sun-loving zinnias in summer, and ornamental kale in fall. And because they're portable, you can shift them around your space to follow the sun or create a new focal point whenever you like. Clara's drawers have weathered over time, the paint fading just enough to give them a soft, vintage look. She says that every time she sees them, she's reminded of her childhood bedroom, and now they hold not only flowers, but also memories. And that's the gift of using old drawers in the garden. They're more than planters. They're pieces of your story, still useful, still beautiful, still part of the home you're creating. Garden borders have a quiet but powerful role. They frame your bed's defined pathways and give your outdoor space a sense of order. While store-bought edging can be pricey, one creative and eco-friendly alternative is to use empty wine bottles. With their varied shapes, colors, and textures, they can create a striking border that costs little to nothing. I first noticed this idea in a small bed-and-breakfast garden I stayed at years ago. The owner, a cheerful woman named Elaine, had lined her herb garden with deep green bottles, their necks buried in the soil and bases catching the sunlight. Some were brown, others clear, and a few cobalt blue. In the morning light, they glistened like jewels. Elaine told me she'd collected them from friends and local restaurants, asking people to save their empties for her. It took a while, she laughed, but every bottle here has a story and maybe a celebration behind it. Creating your own bottle border is simple. Start by cleaning the bottles thoroughly and removing any labels. You can soak them in warm, soapy water to loosen adhesive or use a scraper for stubborn spots. Dig a narrow trench where you want your border to be deep enough to bury at least 1/3 of each bottle for stability. Place the bottles upside down, side by side, pressing them firmly into the soil. If you like a more uniform look, use bottles of the same size and color. For a whimsical patchwork feel, mix colors and shapes. One of the unexpected benefits of this edging is how it catches the light. Morning dew sparkles on the glass, and in the late afternoon sun, the bottles seem to glow from within. They also help keep soil from spilling into pathways and can deter small animals from wandering into beds. If lifting heavy bottles is a concern, enlist help for the setup once in place. The edging requires almost no maintenance. You can even line just part of a garden bed or create a small decorative feature instead of edging an entire plot. Elaine's bottle border has lasted for over a decade, weathering every season with grace. She told me she loves how it sparks conversation. Guests often stop to guess which bottle might have once held champagne at a wedding or wine at a cozy dinner. It's a reminder that beauty can come from the remnants of life's celebrations, and that what once held joy indoors can now frame it in the garden. There's a special kind of music in a garden that doesn't come from radios or wind chimes. It comes from the soft rhythmic patter of rain. A rain chain captures that sound while guiding water from your roof to the ground in a way that's both functional and beautiful. And you don't need to spend a fortune on a store-bought version. With a handful of old spoons, you can create a rain chain that's as unique as your garden itself. I first came across this idea in the backyard of a retired artist named Henry. He'd strung together dozens of mismatched spoons, each one gently curved to catch and guide raindrops. The chain ran from the corner of his roof down into a large ceramic basin filled with smooth stones. On rainy days, the spoons shimmered with water, each passing it down to the next in a silvery cascade. Henry told me he'd collected the spoons over years from flea markets, thrift stores, and family hand-me-downs. They used to stir soup and sugar, he said with a smile. Now they stir the rain. To make your own, gather at least 20-30 sturdy metal spoons. Flatten them slightly with a hammer if you like, then drill a small hole in the handle of each. Use strong metal rings or weather-resistant wire to connect them in a chain, spacing them just far enough apart so water can flow freely from one to the next. Attach the top to your gutter where a downspout would normally go and anchor the bottom in a decorative basin barrel or directly into the soil where you want the water to drain. The beauty of this project is that it transforms a practical need directing rainwater into an artistic statement. On sunny days, the spoons catch and reflect the light, adding a touch of shine to your garden. On rainy days, they provide a soothing soundtrack that's far gentler than the clatter of water hitting metal or concrete. If climbing ladders or working with tools is a challenge, you can assemble the spoon chain at table height and ask a friend or neighbor to help with installation. Once in place, it requires little maintenance beyond an occasional rinse to remove debris. Henry's rain chain has become one of his garden's most beloved features. Neighbors stop to watch it in action, children reach out to feel the water trickle past their fingers, and visitors often ask where they can buy one, only to be surprised when he says it's handmade from spoons that might have otherwise been forgotten. It's a perfect example of how the simplest objects can be reimagined into something graceful, useful, and quietly magical. A spoon may seem ordinary, but in the right hands, it can carry the rain like a gift from the sky to the garden below. Healthy soil is the heart of every thriving garden, and nothing enriches it quite like compost. But buying a ready-made compost bin can be costly, and for many of us, those prices are enough to make us stick with store-bought soil. The truth is, you can create a perfectly effective compost system with something you might already have or can find secondhand: a simple lidded trash can. I first learned this trick from my neighbor Phil, a retired landscaper who swore by composting. He didn't have a fancy setup tucked in the corner of his yard, just two sturdy plastic trash cans with tight-fitting lids. He drilled holes all around the sides and bottom for airflow, and every week he tossed in kitchen scraps, yard clippings, and a few shovels of soil. Within months, the cans were filled with rich, dark compost, ready to feed his flower beds and vegetable patch. Building your own is easy. Choose a trash can made from heavy-duty plastic with a secure lid to keep pests out. Drill or punch holes about 2 inches apart around the sides and base to allow for air circulation and drainage. Place the can on bricks or a wooden pallet so air can flow underneath. Then start layering green materials, fruit and vegetable scraps, grass clippings, coffee grounds with brown materials, dry leaves, shredded newspaper straw. Give it a shake every few days or roll the can gently on its side to mix everything. This helps the decomposition process. The beauty of this system is its accessibility. The can's height means you don't have to bend low to add materials, and its portability allows you to move it closer to where you're working. You can even keep a smaller version on a porch or balcony if you garden in containers. Phil used to say his compost cans were like little treasure chests, holding what looked like waste, but turning it into something priceless. Each spring he'd lift the lid and inhale that earthy scent, knowing his garden would thank him for it. And it did. His tomatoes were sweeter, his roses fuller, and his herbs more fragrant than any I'd seen. A compost bin made from a trash can is proof that good gardening doesn't require expensive tools or elaborate setups. With a bit of care and patience, you can turn everyday scraps into the foundation of a lush, healthy garden, and in the process give new life to what you might have thrown away. Sometimes the most delightful garden accents come from looking at an everyday object in a completely different way. Take a wire whisk, for example. In the kitchen, it blends eggs or batter, but in the garden, it can cradle blooms in mid-air, catching the breeze like a piece of airy sculpture. Old whisks, especially the large industrial-sized ones from restaurant supply stores, make surprisingly perfect frames for small hanging planters. I first saw this idea at a flea market garden display. A vendor had taken several oversized whisks, turned them upside down, and filled the rounded cage with moss and soil. Out spilled trailing lobelia, sweet alyssum, and tiny ferns, the blooms swaying gently as though they were part of the wind itself. It was so simple yet so striking that I couldn't believe I'd never thought of it before. Making one is straightforward. Start with a large wire whisk. Thrift stores, garage sales, and even your own kitchen drawer might yield one. If the handle is solid, you can loop twine or chain through it for hanging. Turn the whisk upside down so the rounded wires form a bowl. Line the inside with moss coconut coir or burlap to hold the soil, then fill with a lightweight potting mix. Small trailing plants work best: petunias, creeping jenny, or even a few strawberries for a functional twist. If bending or reaching is difficult, hang the whisk at eye level from a shepherd's hook or porch beam so it's easy to water and tend. Because the basket is small, it's lightweight and easy to move around to catch the sun or protect from bad weather. You can even cluster several whisks together for a floating garden effect. One summer, I made a set of these whisk planters for my friend Ellen's patio. She had a fondness for quirky conversation-starting pieces, and these fit the bill perfectly. Every guest who visited asked about them, and more than one left determined to scour thrift shops for their own whisks. Ellen said they made her feel like her garden was wearing jewelry, delicate, playful, and full of sparkle in the morning dew. And that's the charm of this hack. It takes an ordinary kitchen tool, one that might otherwise gather dust, and gives it a second life as part of your outdoor sanctuary. It's a little reminder that creativity often starts with a single question: what else could this be? In the garden, that question almost always leads to beauty. Growing potatoes might seem like something only farmers with big plots of land can do. But the truth is, you can harvest your own right from a small backyard or even a patio with the help of a humble laundry basket. This method is not only budget-friendly, but also easy on the body, making it perfect for gardeners who want to avoid heavy digging. I first came across this idea while visiting a local community garden. One of the members, a cheerful man named George, had lined several old plastic laundry baskets with burlap and turned them into potato planters. Each basket sat on a small wooden stand, making them waist-height so he never had to bend or kneel. By midsummer, green potato plants were spilling over the sides, and when harvest time came, he simply tipped the baskets to reveal piles of fresh, clean potatoes, no back-breaking shoveling required. To make your own, start with a sturdy laundry basket, round or rectangular. It doesn't matter as long as it has good ventilation holes. Line it with burlap, landscape fabric, or even an old cotton sheet to keep the soil in while still allowing excess water to drain. Add about 6 inches of soil to the bottom, then place seed potatoes cut into chunks with at least 1 eye each on top. Cover with another layer of soil. As the plants grow, keep adding more soil or straw until the basket is full. This encourages more tubers to form along the buried stems. Because the basket is raised and lightweight, you can position it in full sun and move it if needed. Watering is easy, and checking progress takes just a peek under the top layer of soil. When it's time to harvest, tip the basket onto a tarp or soft ground, and you'll find your potatoes waiting. No digging, no missed tubers left in the earth. George told me he started growing potatoes this way because he wanted his grandchildren to experience the joy of harvesting without the hard labor. They think it's like finding buried treasure. He laughed, recalling the squeals of excitement when the first potatoes tumbled out. This method isn't just clever. It's a reminder that gardening can be adapted to our needs. With a laundry basket, a bit of fabric, and some seed potatoes, you can enjoy a generous harvest without straining your body or your budget. And when you serve those homegrown potatoes at your table, you'll know every bite came from your own ingenuity. There's a quiet magic in starting seeds, the anticipation, the daily check-ins, the joy of spotting that first green sprout. But seedlings are delicate, and a sudden cold snap or harsh wind can undo weeks of care. That's where a small greenhouse comes in handy. And with a few old window frames, you can build one that's charming, functional, and entirely your own. I first saw this done in my friend Lila's backyard. She'd collected mismatched wooden window frames from thrift shops and salvage yards, each still holding its wavy glass panes. With a little help from her son, she joined them together into a simple box-like structure with a hinged roof. Inside, trays of lettuce, tomatoes, and zinnias basked in the filtered sunlight, safe from chilly spring nights. The whole thing looked like it had been plucked from a storybook, weathered wood glass that caught the light just right, and a riot of green inside. To create your own, gather 4 to 6 old window frames in good condition. Clean them thoroughly and sand any rough spots. Using screws or corner brackets, attach them to form the sides of your greenhouse. You can add a wooden frame on top to hold one or two windows as a hinged lid. This makes it easy to open for watering and ventilation. If the frames don't match perfectly, don't worry, that's part of the charm. Paint them in cheerful colors or leave them rustic for a more vintage feel. Position your greenhouse in a sunny spot, ideally where it's sheltered from strong winds. Inside, you can place trays, pots, or even small raised beds for seedlings and tender plants. The glass holds in warmth while letting in light, creating a cozy microclimate that can extend your growing season. For those who prefer not to kneel, you can build the structure atop a waist-high base, making it accessible without bending. Lila's greenhouse became more than just a plant shelter. It was a gathering spot. Her grandchildren loved to peek inside and check on the babies, as they called the seedlings. She told me it felt like giving each plant its own little home until it was strong enough to join the rest of the garden. And that's the real beauty of this project. By repurposing old window frames, you're saving a piece of history, creating something useful and nurturing life all at once. It's proof that gardening doesn't require expensive equipment, just a bit of resourcefulness and the willingness to see potential in what others might discard. As we've journeyed through these 20 simple budget-friendly garden hacks, I hope you've begun to see what I've long believed: gardening is less about what you have and more about what you do with it. An old chair becomes a flower's throne, a tin can grows herbs for your table, and a forgotten window frame shelters seedlings until they're ready for the world. These transformations aren't just about saving money. They're about honoring the value in things and in ourselves. Over the years, I've met gardeners who could afford the newest tools and store-bought decor, yet they still choose to create from what's already around them. They say it makes their gardens feel more personal, more alive. And I've seen others working with tight budgets and aching backs who turn cast-offs into treasures simply because they believe beauty is worth the effort. In both cases, the heart is the same: love for the process, joy in the results, and pride in the creativity it took to get there. If there's one lesson I'd like you to carry with you, it's that nothing, no object, no scrap, no season of life is beyond redemption. The same way an old pallet can become a privacy screen or a broken pot can hold a fairy garden, you too can adapt, repurpose, and keep creating beauty in your own way. Your garden, like your life, is a patchwork of small choices, each adding color, texture, and meaning. So, which of these ideas sparked something in you? Was it the thought of painted rock markers bringing color before the blooms, or the gentle tinkle of a rain chain made from spoons? Maybe it was imagining your grandchildren's delight at harvesting potatoes from a laundry basket. Whatever it was, I hope you'll try at least one. And if you do, I'd love for you to share your story. Because each time we pass along an idea, we plant another seed. Subscribe if you'd like more of these gentle inspirations, and together we'll keep finding new ways to make our gardens and our days richer without spending much at all. Until next time, dear friend, may your hands stay busy, your heart stay light, and your garden, no matter how big or small, be a place where you feel at home.